Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm gonna talk about season 1 of Altered Carbon. Screw that up, but it's staying in. Fantastic season. Obviously, I'm gonna start it off with a non-spoilerish review, but just like what I think. This show just automatically does a very good job of world building, which obviously when I get to the spoiler stuff, I'll kind of get into it more, but just fantastic, beautifully done world, especially for someone who's never really watched. Obviously, like, I've made the comparisons, I'm sure other people have too, of comparing this to like Blade Runner movies. I've never seen any of the Blade Runner movies, so a world like this is the first time I've ever seen it. I've also made comparisons to Ghost in the Shell, which is funny because I've never seen anything Ghost in the Shell all the way through. Like, even the anime, I've only seen like bits and pieces here and there. But nevertheless, there's a lot of stuff that obviously you take from the trailers that going into the season, I'm like, oh wow, that's not what I thought it was. Which obviously, once again, another thing I'll kind of get into with the spoilers. But I like being like, oh wow, so that's what that actually means. Because obviously with trailers and stuff like that, a lot of stuff is cut to be out of context. But it's just like the context of the trailer still made me think certain ways. And I'm like, oh wow, it turns out I'm completely wrong about that. So I like that. It's like, oh wow, I thought it was this way, but it actually was more interesting because it's actually this. They got a lot of surprises in the season that I thought were kind of neat. Just fantastic. If you have not, you've only watched a few episodes, you haven't even checked it out at all, change that right now because it's very worth your time, especially if you're looking for something very cyberpunk, something very sci-fi, get very nice mystery element because, like I said, the world building and just the story itself is constantly evolving because you're like, well, this is this, and it's so good and well worth your time. A lot of good action scenes, super bloody too. I will go ahead and forewarn you that. Also, really quickly, did not know there was going to be so much nudity in this. Not like it's a bad thing, but it just kind of caught me off guard because I'm like, I just wasn't expecting, and a lot of sex and nudity is all I can say. But I guess at the same time, it kind of fits the whole, motif of the show a little bit with the whole aspect because that kind of be enter spoilers a little bit. So I'll kind of say that it'll kind of be one of the first things I talk about when I enter spoilers then. But like I said, if you have not checked it out or you're still, only, partway through, hurry up and finish it. It's fantastic. Very strong all the way through, in my opinion. Once again, all that I am saying is my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt, essentially. So that's it for non-spoilers for now. At this point on, I will be going into spoilers. Do note that I'm not going to be breaking things down episode by episode, hence why I'm saying go ahead and watch the entire season, because I'm going to be talking about everything blanket all across the board. I'm not going to be talking board. I think I said board. All across the board. I'm not going to be talking about things in any particular order, so I'm just going to be talking about them as things come up that I want to talk about and discuss about this season. So once again, spoilers start now. You have been warned. So okay, so picking up what I was bringing up earlier about the whole nudity situation, which in actuality, it's just nudity. It doesn't really matter. But if you really think about it, it can. I don't know if this was your intention, but if you think about it, you'd be like, oh, it kind of fits the motif of the show, like I was saying, because it's because the whole aspect of stacks and everything of you move from flesh to flesh, sleeves are just sleeves. There's no meaning behind human flesh anymore because you just be anyone or anybody. So I guess it's kind of showing just how little the human body really just kind of means in a sense. Because there's only a few occasions throughout the show where it's kind of oh man, people fight for sleeves. The whole Riker situation, which I'll kind of get to later on and stuff like that, especially when it was came to Ortega, Talk was no, make sure she keeps her sleeve intact as much as possible. So I don't know, it's just something I was gonna think about. But just covering the entire season back and forth, it was phenomenal. One of the things I brought up earlier about the whole misconceptions thing, one is that I thought Talk is oh man, they're bringing Todd back. He's a detective and they need him to solve, Lauren's murder. But it's no, Todd's not, he's not a detective or anything. In fact, he's actually considered a terrorist. Didn't see that coming because when I was oh, envoys, what are they? I kept thinking in my head, oh, envoys are these special group that there's some ancient warriors type of situation was what I was kind of thinking. It's no, envoys are just a group that was put together by Kel. It's just it was her little group. They were the envoys. So it's not they were some sanction group. They were a resistance group is what they were. So it's just, I don't know. That was something I kind of didn't see that aspect coming about that. Because that was in my head. Because I was like, okay, so it's like, why else would you be bringing someone back who's been down for like 250 years? I was like, oh, I was like, obviously he had to be like some super great detective. It's like, no, because it plays into the story and everything about why Tak was chosen. Even I brought it up earlier, the whole Riker situation. Even the sleeve that he was in being like belonging to someone else. Because that was something I not thought about either. I was like, oh, these are just bodies that were constructed. I didn't think about the fact that, oh, these are actually bodies that previously belonged to someone else. That really only pops up in Riker and Talk's situation, because no, that doesn't really come up in any other story in that regard. It's just kind of like like their example is the only one that's really shown in the show, but maybe there are other examples and I'm just not remembering. But like his is the one that kind of weaved into the story of like, oh yeah, this actually belonged to what was originally a cop, but because he got arrested and sent off to jail, well, basically he's on ice. Because of that, his body was kept in storage, and Ortega was paying to keep it in the mortgage and upkept. And I guess normally with a situation like that, they would just dispose of the body. But it was such an interesting thing to me. It's like, oh wow, it actually belonged to someone else. It's like, so are a lot of these other bodies like that? Are they kind of recycled? Were these actually someone else's sleeve? Or is it a situation of they get rid of most sleeves? Like, oh, this person no longer is in their sleeve anymore. Oh, we dumped the body. Or do they reuse? But that's something I kind of think about, because it's also another element to it too. It's like, oh, who has the original, sleeve, the original body, and who doesn't? Like Ortega, like, is one example of like, oh, like I have my original sleeves type of thing. So it's just such an interesting element to me that like I'm glad I went into it with that misconception, because I was like, oh my god, that's so interesting. Like I said, I was thinking the whole aspect of like, oh man, it's just, oh, like this is just what talk looks like now. It's like, no, it all played a relevance in the story. Plus the fact is the body belonged to someone else before him. So I thought that was kind of neat. Got so much to kind of go over this season. Some of my favorite characters overall. Poe, love Poe. I'm so sad his story played out the way it did. I was like, no, Poe. Especially some of his arguments between him and Vernon, because it's like, Vernon's like, I don't want you like training my daughter how to be a killer and fighting. But it's like, in Poe's way, it's like, no, I'm teaching her how to fight so she can feel safe again. Because not only am I trying to repair her mind, I'm trying to repair her body and make her feel comfortable, that to the point when it's time for her to return to the real, she's more comfortable, she's confident, she's able to defend herself. So, but I also like that twist later on when like you see like Poe get a little like, whoa, I'm like, he was starting to wonder if he'd made the right decision, because it's like, I'm teaching you to be violent, and that violence begets more violence. So what if I'm just like perpetuating this cycle of violence? But it's like, for Lizzie, it's like, you gave her strength, you gave her purpose, you gave her focus. Which, interesting, like the entire time I kept wondering, I was like, why does that actress who plays Lizzie look so familiar to me? It took me a while, but then I finally clicked. I was like, right, that's Valerie from Riverdale. Like, totally took me a while to get. I was like, why is that? I felt like such an idiot for not realizing that. But nevertheless, I mean, in the long run, it turned out to like be good that like doing all her training, because she went all badass at the end, kind of like taking all those dudes down when they were up on heads in the cloud, and taking all those guys down by herself. I was kind of halfway expecting her to take down Long, but she turned out no. I mean, that ended up being Ortega's fight. But I'm kind of, like I said, I'm getting all over the place, so I do apologize for that. But getting back to it, like, I was just hoping like something would happen, like Poe had a backup or something like that, because it was so interesting because of what Poe's aspect of, like, even from the very beginning, like Poe was very human, and even the other the other AIs kind of like bagged on him a little bit. It's like, you're spending a little too much time with humans, you're trying to be like them. It's like, no, we're better than them, stop trying to be like them. But Poe kind of I don't know, he enjoyed that aspect about humans, understanding them, because it's like, for him, it's like he spent so much time lonely and went insane, but in that insanity, he found sanity, is what he was kind of explaining at one point in time. Because he was very protective too when it came down to it, because it's like Elliot started talking trash, and he's like, does that hurt? No, he starts smashing up the place, because it's like, oh, this hotel is you, right? Does you feel pain? He's like, no, but I do feel anger, and like turn all the guns on Elliot. And even later on, he's talking, he's like, well, don't tell, I'm not talking to Elliot right now. It's like, why don't you tell him that yourself? It's like, well, I can't, because that's the point, I'm not talking to him. Like I said, like, Poe just had a lot of personality. I'm just sad that his story played out the way he did. I didn't even get that whole thing about why he gave himself the name Eddie. Like, he was like telling Lizzie to call him Eddie. I don't get that. I completely missed what that was kind of about. Was it just kind of like, oh, he wouldn't just give himself a regular name or what? But especially because it's like what the Raven Hotel represents. It's just kind of like, oh, place to come get your jollies off. And it's like, thank God. Like for him, it's like Tak was like the first person that's been there, wasn't it, like 50 years or something like that? Like it's been a long time since anyone had been to his hotel, so that's why he took. And just, I don't know. I was just hoping, like, even at the end, they never show anything like, oh, like he's still alive. Like, it seems like everything that what was Poe is gone, which is super depressing. I was like, no, Poe. That just sucked. For one, I kind of bouncing around. I really enjoyed learning more about the envoys. Like I said, I like it. It's like it's very like little sections off of like bits here and there about them, as well as learning about, Kel. It's only a little bit at a time, but then you later on have that entire episode dedicated, which I really appreciated because it added more context to a lot of stuff. You kind of came to understand the envoys, especially Kel too. Understanding that her real name was Nadia. She's actually the one who created Stacks, was pretty neat, but she ran away because for her, it's like, she built this thing because she wanted to see the stars. There's no way you can see all there is to this like vast world universe, all the settled worlds. You couldn't look beyond the stars in one lifetime. So she created Stacks as a way of expanding that. But then it's like it kind of turned into this grotesque thing. And I think that it plays a lovely part in the story because it's like, oh yeah, there is a downside to this whole aspect of like there being like Stacks make it impossible for there to be death, and because of that, so technically in this world there is no death unless there's RD, like your real death in the sense of like your stack gets destroyed or whatever. But it's like technically everyone's kind of immortal because your body might die, but you can always be put into a new sleeve or whatever. But the thing is, with the immortality, eventually you kind of lose bits of what makes you human, and then eventually, and it's something Kelly even says, like even the best end up, becoming monsters in a sense, which kind of played a part in Rey's story, which I love that turn because I didn't expect her to be the main villain that she was, in a sense of like, because when she first popped up, I'm like, oh my God, his sister's still alive. Because I had that thought when I saw the trailers. I was like, his sister's not. I was like, oh wow, no, she's dead. I was like, oh, she's just going to pop up in his head every once in a while, just like Kel was. I thought it was going to be something like that. It was like, no, she actually pops up. I was like, no, that's not really your sister, Tak. It's someone pretending to be your sister, messing with your head. Because they had set up people like Hemingway. I'm like, oh my God, this guy, he's like either the main antagonist or he's working for. It's like, oh no, that actually is Rey. She's been jumping into so many different sleeves. People connected to Tak, like the lady who brought Tak up to Lawrence. It was her, like the that meth lady, and then the little girl he met like at that museum, and like I said, Hemingway. They were all her for the purposes of kind of just maneuvering situations of trying to get Tak towards her. And it's like that's not someone pretending to be your sister. It actually is your sister. And just like how crazy she kind of became, and it's not just now, she was kind of crazy years ago when she basically decimated all of the envoys, making it only her brother survive, even turning on Kel and everything. It's like, that sucks. But it did such a beautiful thing with their story, because it's like, I think it's a combination of their upbringing plus their situation. Tak was recruited by the Protectorate, in particular, Jaeger, and just being raised by the Yakuza too. Just all that accumulated into her kind of becoming who she was. I mean, the fact of the matter is, because I think for her, it's like, especially when she found out what Kel's real end game was, like to make it so that real death was possible. It's like everyone gets a good 100 years, but basically be a virus that makes it so it's impossible to exist beyond that. So, but for her, it's like, I just got my bro back in my life. I'm not about to lose any more time with him. It's like, because she even said it herself. She was talking to Tak, like, let's get out of here. We can like spend millions of years together, just you and me. We're a family and everything. But for Tak, it's like, the envoys, they are a family too. And just like that, Rey just helped basically snuff them out. She used the Rawlings virus to make them because that was another thing too. The Battle of Stronghold, I thought legitimate. It's like, oh, it's going to be a battle like the envoys versus like SeaTac or something like that, or the Protectorate. I thought it was going to be some battle, epic battle, like you saw in the museum. I thought like those things they were showing of Kel and the other envoys, I thought that was taken from that battle. It's like, no, the Battle of Stronghold was basically the envoys being turned against each other, killing themselves as well as killing each other. I was like, that sucks, because it was a full-blown massacre. That ash that like Tak kept seeing and stuff, it's like, oh, that's ash from like the forest being burned down and stuff like that. And it was just like I said, it takes a lot of your expectations and it kind of flips them around and stuff. But like I said, with Rey herself becoming the villain, because in her own twisted way, everything she did was for her brother. It took a while, but she had to, even herself, she's like, I had to wait for the perfect time to bring you back so that basically we could be together and everything. Like the Demi twins kind of messed that up for her. It's like the first twin basically tried to fight Talk, which Poe helped obliterate them. But it's like, you didn't do what you were supposed to. And you had the other Demi capturing him and torturing him because he thought Talk was actually Riker. Which that whole scene with him, like, at the Way Clinic, like, being tortured, I was like, that's brutal. Like, that was our first time witnessing that in the show, like, that whole aspect of the virtual torture aspect. Because you can basically make someone die over and over again, because the whole point is to break them. But Talk didn't break. But there were points where he did, but he had to remember his training with Kel, and it kind of quelled his mind to the point that he could take advantage. And then he proceeded to massacre everyone in the Way Clinic. It was crazy because even Ortega and Abad came there, and it's like, holy shit, there are just dead bodies everywhere. Which is messed up on that whole like Way Clinic situation is messed up on multiple situations. For one, it was a whole like Alice situation, like her being like cut open and just like, I guess that's a situation of just like her organs. Or being like, because later on, like the whole Ortega is like, oh, what about the kids like in the Ortega family? It's like, oh, they could represent raw materials. So I guess that's what that was all about too with Alice. Like, it does make you wonder what happened to her stack and everything, I guess. Because last time we saw, like, her throat was slit and stuff, but like it didn't seem like her stack was damaged. Maybe they just removed it, or maybe they just put her to work in a different. But I don't know. But it just seemed like it was probably like a harvesting type of situation of like, well, there's this stack that's dead now, so like, we take advantage of it or something like that. Second part about it, it's like that whole situation was set up by Rey. She created like a torture clinic, essentially. Like, that's what happened to Lizzie. She was sent there and her mind was broken. And it's like, you run something like that, but it's combined with just... Like, it goes back to what I brought up earlier about the whole aspect of what the show does well. It's like, immortality makes you a monster, because eventually it gets to that point where you start crossing lines that you thought you'd never cross, which plays heavily into Lauren's story, which, to be fair, like, that kind of doesn't 100% fall on him, but it still does. But I'll kind of get into that in a second. But it's just the whole aspect of, like, you just start making more and more excuses. For her, it's like her excuse kept being, my brother. I'm doing this all for my brother. She even, like, badmouthed her mom to talk. Because it's like, I hate her mom. She was weak. And the fact of the matter is, I wear this necklace not to remember her, but to remember the fact that she was weak and never be weak like her again. I mean, it's like, your mom got it super rough, abusive husband who killed her and then dissolved her body in coolant. And it's like... try to tell people, but people are like, oh, you're stupid, your mom ran away, you're just a little kid that doesn't know anything. That sucked. And like the show also did that beautiful thing of, because of these certain domino effects, because Talk decided to leave his sister alone, she became this powerhouse, this monster that she became, to be everything they didn't want to be, they wanted, because even Talk kind of brought it up. It's like, you had Long kill everyone in that family, even the kids. That was a situation we were literally in, and you did that. What is wrong with you? But for her, it's just like, no, I'm doing this for us. It's because Ortega came in and killed all my clones, so I decided I needed her family massacred. It's like, Rey was completely out of her mind, dude. But I love it because I love when a villain is so close to home like that, dude, because it adds that personal story, because it makes fighting them that much harder, because it's like, he has to take on his own sister. For him, it's just, I'll take her down. The whole Rawlings situation of using that virus to basically destroy all her backups, which I love that being an element of just how the immortality and representing myths as gods is the fact is that because they back themselves up and everything. Because that was kind of an interesting thing about Long. Like, I like the whole aspect of him being the Ghost Walker. I don't think they ever they explained it, but even Mickey was like, yeah, it's kind of hard to explain. They never really explained how Long did that. I guess it was just access to the technology Rey gave him, because that was kind of probably like her number one enforcer. But the fact of the matter is, he could hide himself on cameras and stuff like that, making himself look invisible. I just thought that was so interesting. Like, but that was never, but like what he represented as a character, just like this devout guy, because every time he comes across someone, it's like, oh, are you a believer? And then that elevator scene with Abad and Ortega, that when he used that device and started ripping flesh, and it got super bloody in that freaking elevator, and Abad taking like that final blow for her. That sucks, especially because it's just like, especially the way they set up Abad to be like, yo, if something happens to Ortega, I'm coming and I'm going to kill you. Talking. Like, you really think you can kill me? He's like, yeah, I do. And then also playing in all that is like the whole aspect of like, it also seemed like there might have been something between him and Ortega's mom. The way he hugged her, like that seemed like a lover type of hold, but it's like nothing ever, that was the only look we had at that. Because Ortega kept saying like, it's weird that you and my mom are on a first name basis. Stop calling her by her first name. And it made it seem like there was definitely something more there, but it was never really elaborated on. I assume that was the case, but I don't know. Ortega's mom like never seemed devastated about the whole Abad situation, not unless she never found out in the end. It was just, like when she was like, I feel like she would have been a little more sad if that was the case, but maybe he just became a close friend. It's hard to say. Like I say, I lean more towards a lover angle, but which would have been weird because it's like your partner who's dating your mom. That's kind of all weird in itself, but nevertheless. And since I brought up the whole like the elevator situation, Ortega getting that souped up arm was pretty cool. Especially when she found out about Tanaka being on the take and everything and slamming him all over the place and taking full advantage of that. Cause she ended up killing one of Ray's clones with that arm, because like you see her punch her once, you get to see like from behind, you see it kind of pushed her rib cage or something back, and she does it again. Now that was a pretty sick scene of her like taking down, cause it's just one of those situations of like, oh, they keep coming, and she's just using bullet after bullet trying to take down all those clones that she's locked in her room with. But it sucks about Ortega's family, because that also plays a role in the show, is the whole aspect of like, there are religious people, like that whole angle of like, oh, this is unnatural, that basically God frowns upon you because of the whole like being spun up, being put into another body. It's like God doesn't like that, because the moment if you get spun up again, it's like God turns his eyes to you, you go to hell, essentially. That's kind of how like the whole religious thought is, and it's just such an interesting element. Because different people have different. Because initially, I thought it was kind of interesting that Tak was super against the whole idea of, like, being spun up again. It seemed like he was kind of super against it and stuff. But I'm like, oh, it makes sense. Why? Because Kel was against it. Because for her, it's like, she wanted to get rid of immortality because of what it did. Because she felt like if immortality is taken away, people will have the potential to become human again. Which is kind of what Tak was hoping would happen with Rey. It's like giving her only one body, putting her on ice. Maybe after a good while, she'll change after being... I mean, we never really actually get a look at what it's like. I guess it's kind of like how Ortega looked when, like, when the construct was going and you're just in that darkness. Or maybe they set up specific constructs for prisoners or something like that. Like, maybe in Tak's case, he was constantly stuck in a loop looking at, the day he died. So maybe it's something like that. So, it's meant to be a punishment type of thing. Like Long was doing to Ortega, making her, like, see the scene as like, oh, I recorded this, so you're going to watch it over and over again. So... But it's like her because the sad thing is for Ortega, her family can never come back because they would be against it. They had a whole episode about her grandma coming back in that dude's body. But her grandma was like, yeah, don't spin me up again after this, because she's kind of said and what she needed to say. Even like her daughter, Ortega's mom, didn't even say goodbye, which is kind of sad, It's like there was fun and games, a little laughter and stuff like that, but it was just kind of like, because they had their beliefs of like, oh, we shouldn't do this. It's kind of spitting in the eyes of God. It does have its advantages, which kind of plays into the story too. The whole like 653, with the whole situation of people who can come back to life to point out the murderers, which is there is a beautiful justice to it, because it's like, if the only one who can speak for the dead is the dead themselves, but that also plays a role in the religious aspects of like, no, the dead should stay dead. But what about the fact is you're letting killers and bad people free, but the dead can come back to life and warn people like, oh yeah, this person killed me, they did this to me, so that they never do it to someone else. But it's a whole debate. It's just kind of like what the world is versus people's beliefs type of thing. because I like that this world isn't like, it isn't some like utopia. It is a dystopian type of future. It's like a very fucked up world. You have stuff like the jacket off stuff, especially when it came to Lawrence, like the whole like rape and like murder shit he was into. That was super like weird and creepy. Not even just weird, just super fucked up. And just like, even Alice was like, well, no, he pays for all the, sleeves he damages. It's like, that doesn't justify what he's doing. That actually played a role in the whole episode. I do like that twist about the whole situation about, like, ultimately, because, like, even before the end of the show, like, Talk had figured it out, but I think he didn't have all the details. He probably had most of the details, but it turning out that it was Lawrence himself who killed himself. And just because it's like, because he didn't remember, he's so conceited that he would never think that, oh, I actually killed myself. And he spun it into this whole murder mystery, which Ray took advantage of. And it's like, oh yeah, you need someone to look into it. Take, quote unquote, my brother, not realizing it, not really revealing herself. But it's like, hey, here's Takeshi Kovac, and the only surviving envoy. He's very good. And why don't you get him to do it? So, but basically it all stemming from Ray needing to blackmail him, so she got Miriam to dose him with Stallion, that male enhancer. He ended up killing one of the ladies he was with. Then there's the whole Mary Lou situation. She killed herself trying to give the middle finger to Ray and Lawrence, but it ended up kind of backfiring to an extent because Riker got so heavily involved in the case, because it turns out, oh, that was his friend, and he wasn't willing to believe that, because it's also like, oh, she was kind of like, don't spin me up again, but it's like, no, she wouldn't be like that. She wouldn't, ain't it called like Neo-C? It's like, she wouldn't sign up for that. But it's like, but the whole aspect of Ray making it seem like they were, because this way people who, that's why she was super against that 653, because it would kind of shine a light on her, because like people like Mary Lou would be able to speak the truth about what happened. So it would have been super bad for business and would basically bring down everything that Ray was trying to accomplish. So, but speaking of Riker, I do appreciate that like, going back to it, like, that's why, because I was like, why is Ortega taking such an interest in Talk? I was like, okay, so I get it, because he's an envoy, he's like kind of a quote unquote terrorist, but it's like, no, that, and it's like, there's many times she helped him out and everything, like when he was in that pit between those two, that husband and wife, which that situation was messed up. The husband and wife who would fight, it's like, oh, the winner gets a better sleeve, the loser gets a downgrade. And it's like, oh, our kids are used to it. It's like, oh, they're super young. And then you had Ortega and Toxing at the same time. No, they're not used to it. It's like, why? I guess because there's a benefit to that, because the better your sleeve. Like, I don't know. Like, they enjoyed that. I don't know why. But basically, Ortega helped him out in that situation. But later on, it's like, oh, the reason why is because she cared about Riker. Because I was thinking she put the tracker on. It's like, oh yeah, she put the tracker on him because that's because she wanted to keep eyes on Talk. But it's like, no, she wanted to keep eyes on his sleeve because Riker's her boyfriend and she cares about him. And it's like, oh, that's what this has all been about. That's why you've been trying to protect Talk, is because you're trying to actually protect Riker, his body. So that was just kind of an interesting thing. But then there's also the whole like, it got super complicated because then there's a whole Ortega and Talk situation. So I did like that Ortega finally was the one, like, because I brought it up earlier. I thought she was going to, like, that Lizzie was going to be the one to end up fighting Long, but it turned out to be Ortega. I'm glad she was the one to be able to fight him, beat him by crushing his leg. And he has the audacity to beg in the end. It's like, you're up here pretending to be some justice warrior, because he's like the only like fanatic you meet in a show that's so like hell-bent like that, because in his eyes it's like, oh, like the myths are gods. It's because it's like all the gods, all of these holy figures we looked forward to in the past and we pray to, they never answered us. But these myths, they are true gods. They are gods that actually speak to us. And it's like, how did you, like, he's a villain that you don't know much about because you don't understand how he got to where he is. And I guess that's kind of fine. But I do appreciate, Ortega taking him down the way she did, because it's like, it's for everything and everyone he killed, including, Abad as well as her family. And it's just like, yes, but it still doesn't bring them back. But there at least there's a little happiness to it. There's some justice in it, I guess, Oh man, like, because there's also, because this, like, overall, this series is kind of super sad with all the blood and death, especially kind of going back to the envoys, especially because like Talk and the Soto hated each other. I'd like that scene that they showed, like her trying to show you, like, oh, your weapons aren't the weapons, you're the weapons. Like out of context, there's nothing to it. It's just like those two are going up against her, but it's like, oh no, the context is that they were actually like getting at each other, and then it turned into like, Kel kind of got in a mix of it, and turned it into a training lesson and everything. I just thought that was beautifully done. But like they hated each other, and he's like, hey, I told you I don't, just because you helped me back there, I don't need your help. And he's like, good talk. And they just talk, and him bonding. But Talk had to be the one to put him down. He's just like, tell him, help me, buddy. And he's like, okay. And then, DeSoto's like, good talk. And Talk's like, good talk. And destroys his stack. I was like, oh, that's so sad because they became so close. Like I said, that whole aspect of family. Also, I love the whole aspect of Talk like splitting, double sleeving, and then just them rock paper scissors. Okay, it's like, so you're just going to stay behind with the whole like take over Ray's plant, and the other is going to go with Miriam to the orgy island. It's like, okay, rock paper scissors. And it's like, okay, you're trying to throw the game. No, we shouldn't do that, but you're trying to throw the game, aren't you? Yeah, I am. Okay, let's do this. Like, I know, because we're thinking. It was just such a weird conversation between the two. I do like that he didn't play much of a role outside of that. It's like, oh yeah, you go off to make Ray think that I really left and everything, and you're secretly off on orgy island. Even like original Talk is kind of like, well, I won, so I got to decide. But I was like, hey, he's never, like, the other Talk has never had sex, so it's like I felt like I owed it to him to let him go off to the island. I wonder is that when it was all said and done, like at the end when both Talks are there and it's like, oh, one of them has to die. I think it was probably like the original Talk's decision. It might have been the other Talk's decision, but it's kind of like, hey, while you were going through all of that stuff, you're the one that has all the memories. You knew all this ahead of time. You know what happens to Ray. You found out about the whole Kel situation. And I was kind of only recently born, so hey, plus I went off to an island and had like spectacular orgies and sex and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, you go ahead and live and I'll die. So it's still kind of sad because it's like, in a weird way, it's kind of like there is that connection. Could you kind of understand the whole demi-twin situation a little bit more? It's still a weird thing, but it's weird in kind of a cool way too. It would have been cool to see them do more with it, but like I said, like other Talk was just off on the island, so never really got to see too much done with that. So I don't know. Who's to say that won't be something that gets used in the future, but probably not. At least in Talk's case, but. There's the whole Vernon and Ava situation. I love that, like, she was in the male's body. It was kind of interesting too, because the person who immediately noticed her was Lizzie. Because like I like they did stuff with Lizzie that I feel like they never fully explained, because it just like the way her mind was kind of being built. Like she was on the array and stuff like that, and she was talking almost like she could see the past, like she could see the present and the future. It's kind of, because she was kind of getting confused with like the past, present, and future. Like the way she was talking, she's like, "Hello." She's like, or is it goodbye? No, she's like goodbye, or it's like, or is it hello? She's kind of like, I don't remember anymore. Like it seemed like such an interesting thing. Like they were, like her brain was kind of being, like I guess whatever Poe was kind of doing to her was kind of enhancing her mind or something too, along with repairing it, because it just seemed like she wasn't thinking on the same wavelength as a person typically was. So, because the fact is, the moment Ava popped up and she's like, oh, even though her mom's in a different body, she could tell it was her mom immediately. She's like, Mom, and then she's like, wait, there's something different. You do something different with your hair, making a lighthearted joke about the whole situation, so I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, it wasn't really much done with it, but like just the conversation she was having with Talk, as well as what she was saying to Poe, it's like she knew exactly what was going to go down. So it's kind of nice that when it's all said and done, that they do have their little happy ending at the end. I mean, granted, they probably will never, it's something that Talk kind of tells Ava, it's like, adapt, because Lizzie will never be the same girl she was because of what happened to her. Poe's making her into someone that's stronger. So Lizzie is adapting to her new situation. You got to do the same thing too. So, because even at the end, it's like, oh, Lizzie kept the synth, and it's like, oh, like, because it's not real, because neither is she, because it's like she doesn't really know who she is, because she's not really Lizzie anymore. It's kind of like that whole, like, I'm a new person, but it's just she's kind of, her identity's kind of skewed just because of everything that's happened to her and kind of being rebuilt into the person that she is. So for her, it's keeping the synth body kind of fit the whole angle of her not knowing who she really is either, because that's not real. Just like her being Lizzie isn't really real too, you know. But it seems like when it's all said and done, they do have their happy family together. I'm sure there's going to be some complications and some readjusting to it. But I also appreciate the fact is that Vernon, complicated relationship with Talk throughout the episode, throughout this season, obviously being like, oh, like kind of being pushed away, but at the same time still having Talk's back. Except that like during that whole like fight situation, because he was off trying to get information about Lizzie and wasn't helping him when Talk was basically having to fight for his life. But what I really loved is when Talk was locked in a way clinic. It literally took all episode, but you know, after Talk blows the place up and is walking out, Vernon's kind of walking up with the guy, and he's like, "Oh wait, what?" Literally came here trying to rescue him, but the guy that was taking him there kind of got lost. So they ended up they ended up getting lost on the way there, and I just thought that was so beautiful. It's like, oh. Like, it's like, what took you so long? It's like, that dude got lost. It's like, he came to save you. But, because I was wondering about that. I was like, oh, it seemed like they would have found out about you. They never came and got you. It's like, oh, he was literally on his way there, but you'd already broke out before. And I was like, that was so beautifully done. Another interesting thing to me, too, was that Miriam was, like, kind of going to her really quickly. Just that whole thing about the whole, like, orgy island thing that she set up with Talk, I thought was kind of interesting earlier on. It's like, oh yeah, just run away with me and everything. Even the whole fact is of them having sex and everything, I thought that was kind of interesting. Which is really interesting too when you think about it, because like Long was spying on them doing that, meaning that now it's actually his sister spying on him doing that, which is weird when you think about that. But I guess for her, just kind of she's in a loveless marriage, but just that whole aspect of like, oh yeah, there's all these different clones out there, and you know, all of them all having one single mind and wanting to, you know, pleasure you essentially. And I was like, wow, that, you know, like I said, other Talk probably was like had a great time, but still, that was just kind of an interesting thing. But going back to what I was going to bring it up is her being behind everything. I had a feeling because there was a whole like point where Talk was kind of framing, you know, Prescott on behalf of Reg, because it's like, oh, I need you to shut down this investigation and everything. I had a feeling, I had a moment I knew Miriam was kind of behind us. Like, yeah, she was too quick to jump on that like bandwagon when it was like no one else in the room kind of jumped on it. Now, Lawrence had his hesitations, but it's kind of like, okay, keep going, Talk. But it's like, like Miriam was the only one that was kind of like, oh yeah, oh, you know, Curtis, if she says anything, like shut her up, like if she interrupts again. And it's just like, wow. Which I feel so bad for Prescott on many different levels, because for one, I forgot she plays that's the actress who, you know, I best know her for playing Cam on Bones. That's kind of like the one thing like I best know her from. So I'm like, oh, which obviously she's a very different person because she's kind of a dick in this, just because she's so snooty and thinks she's better than everyone else when in actuality she isn't. Because it's kind of sad. It took losing everything for her to, like, it kind of plays into the episode to the aspect of like, not an episode, the show of, oh, by becoming like by being brought back down a peg or two, losing everything, she became human again, kind of what Kel was talking about, because she ended up ultimately helping in the long run. She helped bring a lot of the truth to light. But like I had a feeling something was up the way Miriam was like that, and I thought Talk caught on to that too. I was like, oh, so she is connected to this. Like, oh, Lawrence is the one behind all this. I was like, okay, maybe not. It's like, well, yeah, we didn't find out about the whole stallion thing, but I was like, okay, I guess that just went as far as that. But I was like, no, because then we find out she's the reason why Lizzie ended up the way she did, because Lizzie was pregnant with Lauren's baby, and then it was like Miriam got super pissed, because it's like, for her, it's like, out of everything that's happened, the only thing they have is their children. And I guess that's the only thing that her and Lawrence have is the children, and it's like, you're taking away from my family with you having a baby. So she literally kicked the baby out of her, which is like, holy crap. And she's just like, it was an accident. It's like, an accident? You repeatedly kicking her until she lost her baby? Yeah, that was an accident. Which is like, that's something I feel like was never really brought up in the show at all, except for that instance with the whole like reproduction. I mean, because we do learn that stacks are kind of put into like people the moment they turn 1 year old, but that's about it. Like, we never, I mean, I guess like reproductive situations still work the same, because overall bodies in this are the same. Like, because that's a kind of another misconception I should have brought up. I thought like bodies were like automatically modified. It's like, no, there's enhancements you can get later on, like Ortega's arm, or that dude who was helping Vernon track down the Way Clinic. Like, that dude kind of had that thing. It looked like it gave him enhanced strength, but that was about it. Like, like for example, talk was just in like his mind, like his body was in view. It's like, oh yeah, we downloaded like the latest military blah 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 to his body. That was about it. So that was good, arguably kind of like a Matrix level, but overall, all the bodies were regular. So I guess like stuff like reproduction cycles and stuff like that, and reproductive organs and all that stuff kind of just worked very naturally anyway. So, but like I said, it was just something I never really thought about because that's kind of like the first time you ever heard of prey. But I guess I should have, considering the fact is like I don't know why, like because you do find out about Lauren's and Miriam's like 21 children, which like was a crap ton, which you never actually get to meet. You only get to meet two of them. There's the one, the one you see the most throughout the show being Isaac, I guess, because he's the one that's kind of next in line. So I don't know whether it's, well, because he's supposed to be like, I don't know if I'm assuming he is the oldest, hence he's kind of the one that's kind of next in line for everything. I did love that storyline about him copying his dad, like trying to understand his dad, like copying his dad's mannerisms and stuff like that. It's like, oh, you're the one that killed his dad. It's like, no, he just wanted his dad's respect. That's all he did, just to prove to his dad, like, oh, I can do this. But Lawrence is not good on change, so he basically has all his kids stuck in younger sleeves. Because one of his children, the one that dressed up in one of Miriam's clones to have sex with Curtis, which is super weird. But we only met her that one time. It's like, kid, like, oh, like I'm actually 67, So, like I said, those are the only two we've ever really met over the course of the season. So. Like that's still a thing too, but it just, like I said, it just never clicked in my head. I don't know why, it just didn't. I am like going back to it. I am curious to see what happens. Like when it's also, I mean, they're going to go on ice, all of them. Lawrence for all of that he did because that's ultimately why he killed himself. Not just because of the whole aspect of like what he was kind of blackmailed into doing, but it's also because even he like talks to talk later on. He's like he was so sure that like he's like, oh, no matter how much of a bad person I am, there's at least one line that I will never cross that kind of makes me better than most people. It's like the fact is he would never kill someone. As we know, he killed someone. Just because he was on Stallion, that doesn't mean anything. We already see what kind of piece of shit human being you are with the whole like jacket off situation and the whole sleeve situation that you always buy new sleeves for people, and just Stallion just amplified what was already there, that you already had that potential in you to kill someone. So it's like, and then like, you have topping, like you thought you were a god, but the fact of the matter is you're more demon than god. And then the fact of the matter is, you wanted to forget. So rather than, you didn't like, it's because he tried to excuse it, like, no, the man who actually did that, I made him pay because I killed him. It's like, no, you ran away. You just try to make yourself forget. It doesn't undo what you did, you piece of crap. So, and even he admits at the end, it's like all we've done is we've ruined each other. It just, once again, that whole immortality thing, it makes monsters of us all. So arguably you can make I think Prescott might have learned from this, being like, hey, in the long run, I walked away from this situation pretty happy. Tanaka, he kind of walked away from this happy too, because it like at the end he came through. It still doesn't justify all that he's done and kind of let go through. Like, yes, he didn't know about the whole like long situation in the police station that ultimately led to a Bond getting killed, as well as that other officer that he impersonated getting killed. Even like Ortega's family. Like, I feel like that was the first like time when it started really hitting him, especially because he went around there and saw what happened to the children and he threw up, because it didn't start hitting Tanaka. It's like his consciousness was kind of getting to him, so ultimately in the end he helped and everything. So it still doesn't make up for it, but I am curious, like, what is Ortega going to do? Is she going to still be a cop and everything? Because I think it's still going to be hard to work with the guy that like kind of played his part in all this. And what about Prescott? She dodged a bullet becoming a method and everything, but I guess like I'm curious to see where she would go from there, so. Like I said, I do appreciate the fact that everything was tied up in a nice little bow. I am sad that ultimately Tak had to end up killing his sister, because she's like the last person like from his life that he had that is gone now. The only family he had left. I do hope at the end he was like, because he threw that picture back at her, but maybe that was because he was like, he never had any pictures of their mom left. And it was a picture of them and their mom. And it's like, Ray was the only one who had that. So maybe he doesn't even have it when it's all said and done, which is kind of super sad. Maybe he did at the end. I don't remember. Like when he was in the Raven Hotel at the very end, maybe he had it in. I don't know. I hope that's something he was able to like keep or something, just so he could remember his mom, and remember his sister, considering everything that's happened, But even like he admits later on, it seemed like there was a look of relief in Ray's eyes when he ended up killing her, because it's like, I think even she wanted to be stopped, but because of just once you've grown to become such a monster, it's hard to come back. It's hard to go back to being human again. So she wanted to be stopped, because I think, because ultimately she felt like she was being betrayed by her brother, because it's like, why can't you, why I set everything up so we could be happy, but you're choosing all these other people over me, you know? Because even then, like, Talk was like, rather than choosing like between Ava or Vernon or Ortega, like who would die, he pointed the gun to himself, was going to pull the trigger. She's like, you were really going to die for them, you know? And I think it made her realize, like, she's not the little sister that her brother knew, and it's like, he won't look at me the same way anymore, and I don't want to be this person anymore. I don't want my brother to have to see me like. Maybe that's something that kind of went through her mind. I mean, obviously it's not what she ever said, because she made it seem like, no, this is me, I'm stronger now. Eventually, when I ultimately have you kill all three of them later on, you won't even feel anything. It's like I said, his sister went super far off the deep end, so. But once again, that's the whole aspect of being a meth and everything. So, which always sounds so weird every time I've said it during this recording, I had to like pause. I'm like, yeah, that actually is what they're called and everything. But it just sounds weird coming out of my mouth. I don't know. I don't know if this is being renewed for a second season or not. I would assume, but to be fair, it's super early because it's only been out for like, if you are curious, it's the 4th when I'm recording this. So it's only been out for like, technically like 2 days. So, but I do know that this is based on a series of books. They're called the Takeshi Kovacs series of books, but each one has a different title, like Altered Carbon is the name of the first book. So I am curious, like, if they did bring it back for a second season, like, would it be like, oh, season 2 of Altered Carbon, or would they would they make a new show for every title of the books, which I think would get super confusing. And I guess, like, well, you could have ultimately done the Takeshi Kovacs, but maybe that wouldn't have drawn enough attention. Maybe like Altered, it's like, no, Altered Carbon's a good, because it fits the whole motif of like what the whole thing is supposed to be about, the whole Altered Carbon, you know, that being humans and stuff like that, you know? So, like I said, it was beautifully done, because obviously he's returning Riker's body at the end, which is so sad to think about. The fact is that him and Ortega, it's like, obviously there's going to be something there, because I was curious, like, when it's all said and done, what's going to happen. But like, Riker was freed and everything, so it's like, I got to return his sleeve, so he has something to come back to. Especially the way it ended, with where it seemed like, you know, Talk was going to stay on the head in the cloud as it crashed, you know, stay there with Rey, because he wasn't going to leave her again. It does seem like, you know, going forward into a second season, the cast will be wiped. I don't think they're going to, I mean, it could be a situation of like he goes back for help from people he met this season, but I feel like because the fact is the entire like season, I mean, there was the whole like envoy stuff, which was taking place on, Harlan, but that's about it. Most of everything took place here on Earth, in particular Bay City, but like there are many different worlds out there that obviously they can explore a lot more of going forward with the show, amongst those settled worlds. And I feel like they would take place, especially because he's looking for Kel and everything, which I thought that was a kind of a nice twist. It's like, she's like, yeah, I've got Kel. Like, I made sure to keep her. I mean, and my question is, why though? And how much was like, because that's the thing with the whole like Rey situation that I'm not 100% sure on, like how much was her and how much was like, was any of that involved the Praetorium? Because I was sure, did I say the Praetorium? The Protectorate. Like, wasn't that, like, how much was her selling them out and how much was like the Protectorate kind of doing it, you know? And it seemed like more so than anything, like the Protectorate was coming down on them anyway, but it seemed like Rey kind of took advantage of it and tried to do her own strike because she wanted to leave her brother all by herself. Like, I wonder what the plan was. I guess, like, kill Kel and make it seem like, oh man, someone else did it. I guess we're just going to have to run away, brother. I guess what's going to be her intention, but she didn't have much choice. But I guess maybe on some level she would have kept Kel around just because it's like, oh, brother, like, probably like backed her system up before like she ended up finding out the truth and everything. And then, you know, I mean, because that made me think, because like at what point in time in between that scuffle would you have had a chance to do that? Not unless it's a situation of like somehow her like stack survived the explosion, which I don't think, I mean, maybe it did, but maybe that's when she backed it up or something like that after the fact. I don't know. Maybe she tracked it down afterwards, like, because I'm sure her stack got destroyed at that point in time, and then she came, and retrieved it. I don't know. But the point I was making is like, different worlds, plus probably a different cast. I am curious to see what body Talk would end up in now. We never really find out what happened to his original body. Like, there's a whole situation. There's a body he was in before he was captured. I was thinking, like, oh, is that supposed to be his body but older? I'm like, it couldn't be, could it? No, because those are two different bodies. Which I didn't even talk about the whole Demi using that thing. I was like, that has to suck. This dude that you hate is parading around in the last body yet. But it seemed like it had importance to Talk, so I don't know whether that was supposed to be like his original body just aged, but I feel like that wasn't the case because his body was already that in an adult, which is also super messed up when you think about it, because there's this whole like situation with the Protectorate. He wasn't in his own body for such a long time. He only was in this body again because he came back home to kind of, help with this whole like Yakuza situation that ultimately led him to Rei. And I'm curious, that's got to be something we kind of deal with later on too, because it's got to, because in Talk's eye, we learn the history between him and Jaeger, because I like that, because when we first meet Jaeger, it's like, oh, he's someone that knows Talk. It's like, why? It's like, oh, Talk was part of the Protectorate. There's even that story that Kill was telling about an ally of hers, Iffy, and that whole story about Iffy played out. And the fact is that Talk knew, and I was like, oh man, that's so interesting that Talk knows it. But then Kel goes, the only way you would know that is if I was there. And it's like, because Talk was there. Because he didn't have high enough clearance, he was the one that was sent out of the room, and because of that, he ended up surviving, because she ended up killing a lot of people because she implanted like a bomb in herself. And then it was fueled by her anger, and she got super angry and exploded and killed like a lot of top like branch people. So that was just kind of an interesting thing, because even though there was that between them, like Kel still trained him, to be fair, because he wasn't directly involved in it, but he was still part of that whole situation, because if he was a friend, and even fell in love with him, because for her, it's like, you're the one that saved me, because she always kind of felt like she had to do things alone. But when it was like, oh, I need people to go with me with this whole thing, like Talk was the first one to raise his hand, DeSoto being like right behind. They'll notice who the last person was to kind of raise her hand, and that was Ray, because she did it reluctantly, because it's like, okay, me and my brother are a team. If he goes somewhere, I kind of have to go with him, so. But nevertheless, I think that will be something we see going forward, though, because Jaeger's the reason why everything played out this way, because he lied about Ray's situation and saying like, oh yeah, like she's going to a good home. It's like, no, she was adopted by the Yakuza, and everything played out the way it did. So he plays a part in that. So, Talk is going to be super pissed at him. So I'm sure he's going to be someone we're definitely going to bump heads with later on. But I'm like with everything, because Talk is kind of like became human again himself, because he used to just kind of he was just so caught up in despair because of everything and everyone that he lost, hence why he just kind of just became the way that he was. But to be fair, the whole like being a quote unquote terrorist and stuff like that more stemmed from the fact is, him and, Ray killing Protectorate and Yakuza people. That was more so it, but also him joining up with the envoys and, and Kel. But, the point I was making up earlier before I went on my huge tangent again was like, what happened to his original body? Is that the body that he's in at the end? Did he find some DNA to kind of get put back in? I mean, because the last time we saw his the previous body he was in, like they had ripped the other Demi, the second twin, had ripped his stack out, and Ortega had crushed it, so the body was still intact. Also, we never found out what happened to Carnage. I know Ray came in and he started killing a lot of people, but Carnage had gotten away. Who is the actor who played Leaky on Orphan Black? He's been in so much other stuff too, but that's kind of like the most recent thing I can think of that kind of place him in. So, like I said, I'm curious what body, because they went out of their way to make sure you didn't see what body he was in. Like I said, it's kind of cool, but at the same time, it's a little sad, because it's like, you're pretty much, at the very least, Joel Kinnaman won't come back as Talk, which is kind of a little sad, because I liked you as Talk. Just the personality that he gave Talk, in Riker's body, so. Like I said, overall, I hope it does get renewed for a second season, because the show is amazing, and I'd love to see what they do beyond this. What are their adventures and other mischief and stuff Talk would kind of get mixed up in, because this is just one world, Like, I don't know if I'd assume everything with the whole meth situation and just everything, that it doesn't just apply on Earth. I'm sure, it kind of applies to all worlds that meths kind of run things. So this is one particular meth story. So what about other people. Also, what happens to the whole like Bancroft situation? Like, I know it's all got left to Isaac, but you know, the whole aspect of immortality and stuff. Like, will he eventually turn up like a monster, like his dad, or not? You know, maybe you know, you put the right people around him, make sure he never crosses those lines. And there's also the aspect of what about what Kel wanted to make it show so that all stacks would stop after 100 years, so that death would be kind of a thing. Like there is a natural order to this, which I didn't even talk about it. But Talk at one point in time didn't wanted like death to not be an option anymore either. Like going back to like keeping things as they are is what I mean. I'm sorry. I'm just kind of messing up here at the end, because Ortega was her life was in danger, and it's like, oh, you know, maybe we shouldn't all die. Maybe it's okay that, you know, life keeps going, that we keep it spun up again, you know. So I don't know. I'm just curious to see whether he tries to aim for that. Like, I know his main thing right now is looking for Kel. So like I said, I'd love to see what they do with the show going forward. But I've gone on plenty enough tangents. I've been running my mouth off. Just kind of been super all over the place. Like, I'm very disorganized when it comes to like binging on stuff, especially when it comes to talking about it. So I do apologize for that. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.